Those days. I remember those days.
Hello, Vinyl Community. This is Tommy, and welcome to another musical adventure. Today's adventure is a little bit of a discussion topic that I thought that I would share. I am a regular listener to Breakfast with the Beatles on Sirius XM, the show hosted by Chris Carter. For the most part, I like the different themes and the variety of stuff that he plays. And those of you who listen to Chris Carter's show, fellow Beatles fans, probably noticed that Chris does play a good bit of Monkees music. And obviously he's a fan. One track in particular that seems to be a regular that pops up is Mickey Dolenz's version of Good Morning. He also will play Monkees tracks when given the chance. And he said something the other day on his show that I thought was kind of interesting concerning the Monkees. And it got me to thinking that this might be a fun topic to discuss. And that is that Monkees fans and Beatles fans seem to be kind of together, that you can be a fan of both of these groups. And the other addition that he said, that fans of the Beatles and the Monkees, more so than fans of the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. Now, the Stones and the Beatles are usually paired up together quite well. Because they're both British bands. They came out around the same time. The Stones kind of following in the wake of the Beatles. But, and there's always a thing. Are you a Beatles man? Or are you a Stones man or person? And, it's usually one or the other that we have preferences for. And there's some of us that do enjoy both. I do like the Rolling Stones. But Chris's take was that the Monkees seem to be more, or Monkees fans seem to be sort of in line with Beatles fans. And it got me thinking that that's really true. There's a lot of Beatles fans that I know that are also Monkees fans. And particularly in America. I don't know how it is over in England. But I know that's the case here. Usually, if you like the Beatles, you're probably going to like the Monkees as well. And like I said, the Stones are in there, but the Stones are usually not, in the same regard, if that were, as it were. But, just thinking about it, and I think some of it has to do with the Beatles and the Monkees are probably more based in sort of a pop sound, as opposed to the Rolling Stones, whose music is probably based more in a rhythm and blues or blues type thing. I think the Beatles kind of went more in the direction, and particularly in the studio years, as just straight up sort of pop music, whereas the Stones kind of diverged and made more sort of blues-based music. I think that's one striking distance. The Stones, of course, are a little dirtier, a little grittier maybe than those clean-cut Beatles, and the Monkees kind of followed in that line. Now, I know the Monkees were based on the Beatles. Hard Day's Night and Help were big influences on what came of the Monkees. And I really don't want to get into the discussion about, one's a real band and one isn't. I get it. The Monkees were a TV show. I understand that. I'm not one of those people that is going to pretend that they were something that they weren't. But just in terms of the quality of music, the quality of songs, and the presentation, I mean, the Monkees have had a very enduring legacy. Now, absolutely not. I wouldn't put them on the status of the Beatles in terms of what they accomplished and all of that. It's night and day. There's no comparison at all to be made there. But it is interesting, of all of those groups of the 60s, when you go back and you look at the 60s iconic bands, it's interesting that the Monkees can still actively tour and be a brand, as it were, that people are identify with, that they will go see. Unlike, say, a band like the Turtles, who were successful in that time, but don't have that same level of sort of commercial success. Now, I know the Monkees deal, a lot of it has to do with the fact that there was that mid 80s revival where the show kind of came back around. A lot of people my age were exposed to the Monkees through MTV and Nickelodeon when they would rerun the shows and sort of, kept that music going. But it's interesting. Monkees fans, there's almost two generations. You've got the original fans from the 60s, and then you have that sort of second wave of fans from the 80s. But the Monkees seem to always, like the Beatles, garner new fans, and I think that has a lot to do with melody and the quality of music. I think all of the heavy criticisms aside for the Monkees for what they were or what they weren't, more specifically, that most people have just accepted the fact that there's some great records there with some top-notch songs, and they're great albums to listen to. Now, no, I mean, are you going to put them in the category of the Beatles of in terms of the creativity and what the Beatles were doing? I mean, the Beatles were a juggernaut. We all know that. I mean, we've talked nonstop about that in the Final Community. So that's not something that we're uncovering new earth here. I mean, everybody knows why the Beatles are considered to be what they are, and rightfully so. And I'm not diminishing that in the least. The Beatles are a big deal band and always will be, and that's the case. But just talking about the cross section of fans specifically, like Chris Carter was saying, Monkees fans and Beatles fans seem to be sort of together in that regard. And the Stones are kind of they're a different entity. I mean, I love all these bands, so but when I go to put on a record, I'm likely to if I'm in that mood for sort of a 60s pop sound, I'm definitely more interested in sort of discovering something along the lines of the Monkees. Like I said, the Stones are their own, and we could talk about all the other bands, the Kinks. There's so many great 60s bands, but it felt like the Monkees and the Beatles kind of work together in a way, as it were, at least in terms of fandom. I mean, what do you think? I mean, older fans that may watch my channel, let me know. I mean, what do you think? I mean, am I way off the mark? Was Chris way off the mark? I think Chris's statement was kind of dead on, and I get it. Where are you on this? I mean, is it like, I know there's a lot of original sort of 60s fans that have dismissed the Monkees and anything the Monkees have done. But I think, like I said, a lot of newer fans, a lot of younger fans, kind of miss that whole, they're a fake band, their music's not to be taken seriously. That's sort of the Rolling Stone Jan Winter byline that carries through to this day, that they're not a band to be enjoyed on any level because their music is quote unquote fake. Now, my argument to that is always going to be a good song is a good song. And so there were a lot of bands in the 60s, particularly in the mid to late 60s, that were fake in that regard. Now, yes, the Monkees had the benefit of a weekly television series to help propel sales and so, sort of the commercial success. Now, it's my understanding that the TV show's ratings were never that great. And I guess you sort of have to, like with Olympic scoring, you lop off the top scores and the bottom scores, and you kind of take what's in the middle. I mean, I know there's a lot of Monkees fans that are sort of the teen girls that were, reading the teen magazines, that were buying, the hairbrushes and the dolls and stuff. But the same thing goes for the Beatles. I mean, the Beatles had a bit of that too. And so, the teeny girl fans, the 12-year-old girls that followed both of those bands, particularly in the beginning, and I think the same thing happened in the 80s too. There was just a sort of new generation of teenage girls that were following those bands. I remember those magazines when I was in junior high school. with the pictures of like Mickey Dolenz and Davy Jones next to I don't know who were the teen, like Kirk Cameron. I mean, they were all in there, and it was sort of like a really kind of odd sort of thing. But excluding that and just talking about the music and the quality of the music and being specific about musical output, I do agree with Chris that the Monkees and the Beatles probably are a lot closer than the Stones. What says you, people of the vinyl community? Comment down below or make your own video. Tell me that I'm just absolutely full of nonsense and have no business talking about this at all. But I'd like to know, I mean, are you a fan of the Beatles and the Monkees? And how does that relationship work? And where do the Stones fit into that? Or do they fit into it at all? Maybe you like the Monkees and the Stones and you don't like the Beatles at all. That might be a possibility. I know I get into trouble when I talk about these sort of comparison things, but I'm just basing this off of Chris's statement. So I didn't even come up with it. So I'm going to totally push Chris Carter under the bus. I know he's probably watching. But anyway, what do you think? Hey, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, I'm working very hard to do weekly content here. And so we'd love to have you along. I appreciate everyone that supports the channel. I mean, you know the drill. But if you haven't done so, hit the subscribe button because I'd love to see you every week. I try to respond to everyone that comments. Comment about this one. Make your own video. Say what you want to. Monkees, Beatles, Stones. Here we go. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.